Welcome to Stop the Fight. And we took a little bit of a beating last night with our wallets, but the sun rises another day, and we're ready for another week of boxing. Let's go!
Don't brag about taking my side piece! Don't brag about taking my side piece, though!
I broke my back. Back is broken. Spinal.
He's strong man, good boy, just...
We have a new light heavyweight champion to join the midst of Better BF, Pascal, and Bivol. And his name is Joe Smith Jr. Joe Smith won a majority decision against Maxim Vlasov in a very, very good fight last night. Unfortunately, we thought the fight would end earlier than that. So we lost on both ends, actually, on the hedge by taking Vlasov and on the under 9.5. You know, I really thought that I was actually really impressed with Vlasov. I did not think he would be able to weather the Joe Smith storm. I thought that COVID would have him out. I thought coming down from cruiserweight, he was still not quite there. I thought 34, he's a little bit older. I was wrong on all those fronts. Vlasov looked very good. He's a legit top 10 heavyweight. Hell, he may be not top 5, but he's a legit top 10 heavyweight, light heavyweight. Very good fighter Vlasov is. He seemed to lack a little bit of pop there. You know, Joe Smith is coming for you. It doesn't matter if you're a very good defensive fighter or what. He's going to catch you. He caught Bivol in their fight, and he was landing on Vlasov. But Maxim, you know, he did a great job taking those punches. He really wanted this fight, and he could have had it. I wasn't scoring it. You know, I was watching it as a fan more so than scoring it. I thought the fight was very, very close and could have went either way. I thought perhaps Joe Smith with the 11th and 12th took the fight. So like I said, any which way the scores, as long as they were close, it was a good score. It would not have been a robbery had Vlasov won a close decision. And again, a majority decision for Joe Smith I thought was a very fair one. You know, congrats to both guys. Joe Smith was bleeding out of his left eye the entire fight. You know, this was not an easy fight for him. He was getting beat up in numerous rounds, and he dug deep. You know, our Long Island man, our working man, and he beat Vlasov. And I think Joe Smith versus Better Biev is an excellent fight. Hell, at this point, you want to see the rematch between Better Biev and Bivol, because while it is true, Bivol had won 99% of their first encounter, he was caught one time. And he was really hurt at the end of that round. You know, Joe Smith has that kind of power. And the numerous times you saw in the Vlasov fight where he landed and Vlasov, you know, was moved 3 or 4 feet one way or the other. I think he caught him with a hook in the mid-rounds, and Vlasov was hurt bad, but Vlasov was smart. He was able to grab on and hold. You know, I would like to see that rematch with Bivol. I would like to see it because Sergio Martinez was also beating Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. for 99% of his fight. And when he was knocked down in the 12th, it looked like he could have went. You know, had that been a 15-round fight, Sergio Martinez would have lost. But, again, I would like to see Smith versus Bivol. I think that would be an excellent fight. And I think Bivol is actually, you know, his resume is looking better and better and better with every passing moment now. If you look at the champ list, Bivol has already beaten half of the champions at light heavyweight. He had beaten Pascal relatively easily, had beaten Joe Smith relatively easily, and those are 2 of the champs at light heavyweight. You know, the other one is himself and Better Biev. So Bivol, I think, is due some pound-for-pound consideration. I really do. You know, it kind of crept up on you. We've always known he was a good fighter, a little bit undersized. I think he could easily fight at 168. An undersized light heavy, you know, who's kind of just winning based off of sheer skill, speed, and IQ. And, you know, he kind of just passes by you. He's not marketed well. You know, he fought on HBO on their last gasp of air that they had in their boxing. I mean, we all miss HBO, don't we, though, by the way? And now he hasn't had a fight in a while. You know, Corona's not ruined, but has really postponed many a careers. So light heavyweight is exciting again in a way, right? You know, like I think anyone can like the Joe Smith story. Anyone can root for a kind of crude slugger who's developing some wrinkles in his game and who has like this devastating power, similar to Wilder, right? why was Wilder so drawn in is because he's kind of like an every guy. He played some sports in college, but he's not a good boxer or anything like that. But due to the sheer power that he had, he was able to become a world heavyweight champion and fight for millions upon millions of dollars. And he still has some left. So Joe Smith is similar. He's a landscaper or something, or roofing or something or the other in Long Island. And he comes out of nowhere. He's got he's got that look like he's just like a local kid, and here he is fighting a very very tested fight against Maxim Vlasov, who, like I said, I wrote off a little bit. But Maxim came out. He was moving really well. He really befuddled Joe Smith in numerous of those rounds. There were many rounds where it looked like, well, they were just a league apart in terms of their boxing skills. And I mean, they are a league apart in terms of their boxing skills. But skills, athleticism, are not the only things that matter in a boxing fight. What you saw with Joe Smith and you saw in this fight is the resilience, the power, and the conditioning that are so important in a boxing fight. And Joe Smith just kept coming. He just kept coming, and he's gotten better at throwing in between exchanges. I've mentioned before how Danny Garcia is really good at that, and that's how he was able to knock Khan out. Khan would throw 3, 4, 5 punches, and Danny Garcia would throw one hook in between that combination, and boom, knock Khan out. So you're starting to see wrinkles develop to Joe Smith. He's now he threw a left hook behind the guard Vlasov during the fight and really hurt him. He's able to find that distance. Distance is a key factor in fighting. To know when your shot will land or just miss, or these are the kind of things that Mayweather is a master of. If you see Mayweather's highlight against McGregor, at one point McGregor throws a jab and Mayweather is able to walk towards the jab, and the jab misses by a hair. A hair. Mayweather knew the distance that well, and you're starting to see Smith. He's able to know and instinctually feel when he can land the shots. He's becoming a more and more dangerous fighter as it goes on. It's actually one of the reasons why I would pick Smith over Beterbiev. I wouldn't hesitate to pick Smith over Beterbiev, but I don't know how I would feel against Bivol again. If he can catch Bivol earlier this time, we may have a really interesting fight on our hands. But Smith is developing wrinkles to his game. He still does things which are, very amateurs or look awkward. Like he sat on the ropes for way too long. Vlasov was really marking him up there, and that's credit to Vlasov. He was able to use his foot positioning and footwork to get Smith into these angles where he couldn't really throw at all. You saw that Smith was having a hard time even like existing at points in that fight. He was just awkward. Vlasov would get into such an angle where Smith couldn't turn, he couldn't throw. He just stood there like a duck and wound up taking a combination. And this is, again, props to Vlasov, who is a very, very skillful operator, much more skilled than I had given him credit for. Again, I said, beating Chilemba, I really think it's a mark of a pretty good fighter. And Vlasov really did. I think it's maybe I just underestimated him. I even mentioned in the pre-fight that the victory over Chilemba is a good one. Sometimes you have fighters whose records are significantly worse than what they are. Chilemba is one of these fighters, and I think Gabe Rosado is often underestimated. And I think, oh my God, Danny Jacobs found out the hard way last fight. Do not underestimate Rosado. His record is significantly worse than would indicate by a fighter of his caliber. Sometimes you get a very good Rosado in that ring. A very crafty fighter. Same thing with Chilemba. So, and Vlasov, by beating Chilemba, by taking, I always think about, look, you lose weight, you're going to be weaker. But at the same time, he brought up a good point, Vlasov, there in his pre-fight interviews. He's taking punches from very heavy-handed cruiserweights, like Raheem Shakayev. Of course, he was going to be able to take Smith shots. But, this is when you're biased. When in my eyes, I saw that under 9.5. In my mind, I saw that under 9.5. And I'm like, yeah, this is the moneymaker right here. I was just sure. And then I found evidence to support my belief rather than the other way. You first, my friends, need to gather the evidence, lay it out, and then follow what they tell you. But I just think that COVID was the X factor. especially following the Povetkin fight. I think COVID was the X factor that told me to not trust a fighter who had dealt with COVID recently. So again, I want to congratulate Joe Smith Jr., who is now, after all this hard work, a light heavyweight champion of the world. And, I want Maxim Vlasov to keep his head up because he's been a pro for 16 years, and finally he's at the pinnacle, at the championship level pinnacle after 16 years. And he loses in such a tough, such a close fight that he easily could have won. Had he been given the decision, there was no robbery, we'd all be happy for Vlasov. Where does he go from here? I don't know. He has the problem of not being a known name and of being a very good fighter now. Not too many people are going to want to fight him. Not too many. He was able to take Joe Smith's best shot. He was hurt a couple of times, but Joe Smith couldn't get him out of there. So if you're not a heavy puncher at light heavy, do you really want to fight Vlasov, who's a mover, who can throw combinations? His only real downside is he just didn't have enough pop. If Vlasov had a little bit more pop, I think he could have stopped Smith in a point. Smith looked hurt in there. So that's that. Again, we got ourselves a new light heavyweight champ. Let's move on to the other big fight of the night. Ennis versus Lipinets. And I think many questions were answered. Very many. I think Ennis is the real deal. I think he may be better than Virgil Ortiz. He moved that well. His speed was that good. His power, it stung. Lipinets had only been down against Mikey Garcia at 140. Not like the slow and lethargic Mikey Garcia at 147 that fought Spence, but the much leaner and stronger Mikey Garcia at 140. I did not think that Ennis was going to be able to get him out of there because simply Ennis just had not had the competition. And not for the competition at the caliber, at the level of Lipinets. And here we go. Here he is. He beat him convincingly. Very convincingly. Now, I'm not saying Lipinets is some kind of world beater at 147. He's not. I mentioned the pre-fight podcast that I expected Ennis to win, and I thought that Lipinets was an undersized 147, undersized welterweight. I think his best class is at 140. Hell, he even looked a little bit less defined at 147, Sergey did. Ennis looks sleek. 5'10" he is, right? Switch hitter, power in both hands, a lot of speed, great movement. And we have a legit pound-for-pound fighter on our hands. Before the video, I said, listen, don't start talking about Crawford. Don't mention him. And while I still feel you shouldn't really be screaming his name out loud, I think you can start whispering it. Because this was a very good performance, guys. Yes, he let some punches in, but this is because Lipinets is a good fighter. When you fight good fighters, you're going to get hit. Hell, you may even lose if you fight the best of the best. But he showed me that he is the total package. I think this is probably the best. Well, certainly I think the best up and coming welterweight. I think he's probably better than Virgil Ortiz. I think his defense is a little bit tighter. He's a little bit faster. He doesn't have the pop that Virgil Ortiz does, but he has a lot of power. Virgil Ortiz just seems to have that Golovkin power, that very A+ level power. But Ennis was able to stop a guy who had never been stopped. And he looked uncomfortable, Lipinets did, the entire time he was taking punches from Ennis. Those punches hurt. I believe Ennis is the future champ at 147. I think if Crawford waits 2 years, I think Ennis beats Crawford in 2 years. Absolutely. Absolutely. He just needs a little bit more time, maybe fight an Ugas, maybe a Sean Porter. If Danny Garcia is smart enough to stay down at 147 and not go up and, fight at 154, then I think a Danny Garcia fight, a Thurman fight. There are fights to be made where he can gain some experience. He doesn't need to jump into a Crawford or a Spence yet. Again, I think I mentioned this before, but you don't want the Fernando Vargas situation. You don't want to throw a very, very high-level prospect into the wolves just yet. But you know what? You could set up that Virgil Ortiz fight. Danny Jacobs fought Dmitry Pirog when both were prospects. It didn't really hurt Danny. You know, like you've put two top-level prospects against each other. Unless someone gets really embarrassed, and Danny kind of got embarrassed against Pirog, but it didn't really hurt his career. Here he is a champion, fought like the 2 pound-for-pound guys at 160 with Canelo and Golovkin, and both were competitive fights. So I think Ennis can handle anyone, or at least can be competitive with everyone, certainly at 147. Like I said, I'd prefer to see a second-tier guy in the top 5, like a Sean Porter, Danny Garcia, or Thurman, before taking on the Crawfords and the Spences of the world. Anyone else, of course, is good. All the top 10 guys are good, I think, for Ennis. I think this is the real deal. I think all our questions were answered by Ennis. And again, we want to say congratulations. For Lipinets, I think he's got to move down. I think it's evident now in his last 2 fights that 147 is just not the weight class for him. He's still young enough, so the age shouldn't be the issue. He has good skill, decent pop, decent speed. He's a little bit slower on his feet, but like I said, I think he's still a very competitive guy at 140. And I think that's where he should look to make his name. I think 147 is just, there's nobody left up here for him to fight to really make a name of himself. Mikey Garcia is up here, who he already lost to. He's certainly not going to beat Ennis in a rematch. Then there's Crawford and Spence. 147 is just not the place for him. I think he can't. He'll struggle being a top 10 guy at 147. He's got to come down to 140. At 140, of course, I think you have opponents that are more suitable to him. Easter Jr., Zapata, Ramirez. I don't know if he beats Josh Taylor or Regis Prograis, but those are at least, I think, in the realm of possibility. They're smaller guys than the guys you see at 147. He looked sizably smaller than Ennis. So I think his future is probably at 140, or it's not in boxing. He's just gonna take another bad loss at 147 if he fights a top guy. And you never just want to become like a stepping stone. There's this game, it shortens your life. You got to think about that. I know he's got a wife and kids. I think he can't. Don't become a stepping stone. If you're too small for the weight class exists for a reason. Go down to 140, reclaim a title, and make some money down there. Well, that's gonna do it for my recap. Again, if you haven't watched, especially the Smith-Vlasov fight, go watch it. It was a very good fight, a battle of wills, a battle of resilience. Either guy could have taken it. Very good fight, and worthy of a championship. It's over.
I'm gonna go home and break my wife's hip.
Don't brag about taking my side piece. Don't brag about taking my side piece, though.
I broke my back. Back is broken. Spinal.
He's strong, man. Good boy. Just.